and we have Bret Jacob joining us. He's going to talk about Work with Pride, and he is the Deputy Director of Policy and LGBTQIA Liaison for the City of Providence, the Mayor's Office. So, Bret, take it over.
Thank you so much, Amy, for introducing me, and thank you to everyone for having me. I'm really excited to be talking to you a little bit today about LGBTQ job fair. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, so just give me 1 second. So personal background, the picture that's up, that's me. I am a proud transplant Rhode Islander, moved here after graduating high school in the Baltimore area to pursue a degree in international business. And after I had graduated, I worked in the private sector for a bit in a managerial role, and then moved on in the public sector as mayoral advance in the office of Mayor Lorza. And then I moved on to be the executive assistant to the chief of staff. And then now, since February, I've been in this role as deputy director of policy, where I've worked, my policy portfolio includes housing and homelessness, police reform, criminal justice, and economic opportunity, among some other things. Next slide, where it should say LGBTQIA disparities. So in my personal life, one of the personal roles that I've taken on, most recently just ended, I was Mr. Gay Rhode Island 2019. And in that, the focus of my platform was raising awareness about workplace disparities within the community. And we can't just look at workplace disparities, we've got to look at this more broadly. And nearly every way in which we measure our society, the LGBTQ community is disproportionately behind. We have lower employment numbers, we have higher gaps in pay, we have higher incarceration rates, higher rates of illness, higher rates of substance misuse and behavioral health challenges. The list could go on, but it's just to say that there are very real disparities that are specific to our community. And it's important to note that those disparities are also intersectional. So Black, Indigenous, people of color have even greater disparities. So the pay gap for a white gay cisgender man is going to be different than that of a Black gay cisgender man. So just important to keep this in mind. And what really kind of is driving a bit of the work around the job fair is this report. This is not an exhaustive amount of research, but this is a really good start for folks who want to learn more about the disparities at work. The Human Rights Campaign conducted a national comprehensive analysis of workplaces and LGBTQ employees there, and found that about half of employees still remain closeted at work. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with the experience of being in the closet, it is a psychologically harmful and exhausting experience to not be able to share authentically who you are at best, and at worst being entirely fearful of the repercussions of maybe accidentally mentioning that you and your spouse, who happens to be the same gender, live together, right? Or when you go to a work function, you don't know if you should bring the person that you talk about as your roommate or not, because you don't want folks to be making the wrong impression or retaliating against you. What's also quite striking is that over half of employees had heard jokes about the community at least once in a while in their workplaces, and almost 60% of non-LGBTQIA+ employees believe that it's inappropriate to talk about sexual orientation and gender identity in the workplace. So while it may be good to have outward-facing and very visible markers of diversity and inclusion and a willingness to accept, I think that these stats really go to a deeper level of what are the individual behaviors, what is your workplace culture like that fosters an inclusive environment for this community. So next slide should say LGBTQ job fair. The flyers is an old one because of COVID. We've had to postpone a couple of times, but knowing the disparities, the social disparities, knowing that there's a higher unemployment rate, and knowing that there are significant challenges that our community still faces at work, the purpose of having this job fair was to bring together organizations that have a demonstrated commitment to inclusive workplaces. And we had 34 organizations go through a really intensive self-reporting process where we used the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index to really have companies evaluate themselves on their internal practices. So it asked questions like, does your anti-discrimination statement include gender identity? Does your health insurance plan include opportunities and coverage for folks who identify as transgender to take advantage of medical procedures that they may need? This is not on the HRC's index, we added this, but does your facility have at least one signed and designated gender neutral restroom? Does your dress code, does it specify what's appropriate to wear to work by gender? And so many other questions that we were asking that were really important to understand. The other thing that we included was an optional training for organizations to take part of that was facilitated by TGI Network and also Thunder Mist Trans Health Access Team. They were also very instrumental. So once we had employers sign up and they went through this vetting process, they were also able to sign up for trainings that were specific for better understanding how to create an inclusive workplace for transgender employees, transgender and gender nonconforming employees. We have folks signed up from the nonprofit industry, from manufacturing, finance, education, government. We've got a wide array of businesses and organizations that are signed up. And what also makes this job fair, in my opinion, unique is that we have service organizations that are also participating that provide basic needs services to the LGBTQ community. So an important piece is, if you are unemployed and also at imminent risk of homelessness, we want to make sure we provide services there that will address that, because you can't go to work, or it makes it a lot harder to go to work if you don't have a home. It also makes it harder to show up to work if your basic healthcare needs aren't met. So wanted to make sure that we include housing resources, healthcare resources, legal resources for folks to take advantage of while they're also at the job fair. We also had workshops that included how to expunge a criminal record, knowing your rights, and health insurance enrollment. And the reason for these things is we know that that our community does face disproportionate incarceration rates, and we don't want that to be a barrier to employment. So if we provide an opportunity for folks to learn how to expunge their records, that would be while they're at a job fair, that'd be great. Making sure that folks understand what their rights are. I'll be quite frank and say that up until recently with the Supreme Court decision, it has been unclear and it has been confusing about exactly what one can be fired for or not, or discriminated against for or not, because of conversations at the federal level. But we know that in Rhode Island, we do have those protections and want to make sure that attendees understand what those protections are, and also learn how to document and report discrimination. And then lastly, with the health insurance enrollment, health insurance is confusing to sign up for it, to understand what all these different medical terms mean, and what a copay is, what a deductible is, and how much something is going to cost, and whether your insurance covers it. So we wanted to have somebody there that could really walk attendees through, okay, once you get a job and you're full, hopefully a full-time job, and you've got health insurance, this is how you sign up for it, and these are what some of the terms mean, and this is what you can expect for coverage, and these are how you ask questions. Next slide is the last slide. So for next steps, unfortunately, the job fair has had to be postponed until 2021 due to COVID. But if anyone is interested in participating, please feel free to email me at brett@prideri.com. And I would just, leave these two questions for folks, who are watching. What research is your organization doing to understand the disparities faced by this community? And I ask that question because, for two reasons. One, we can't separate the person who exists outside of work and the person that walks into the building. And understanding that there are disparities in this community, I think will help foster a more comprehensive and more inclusive diversity plan. And also, thinking about what work are you doing before you ask somebody from the LGBTQ community to come to your table and say what you should, ask. What should we be doing? I think it's important that allies also do their due diligence and research. And then sort of a related question, what investments are you making to help address the disparities that exist outside? So, one thing that I can think of before COVID was that not a lot of folks have had a remote work policy. That's obviously changed now, but one thing that I think about is for this community, behavioral health or mental health concerns, particularly depression, anxiety, tend to be kind of high, and sometimes that makes it hard to just get out of bed. So, are you a company that recognizes that for some folks, and not just LGBT folks, it could be hard to get out of bed if you're facing a depressive episode? So, are you investing in remote work opportunities so that folks could still be productive and still be able to work, but maybe just not have, if they have a day where they're not able to just leave the house, that's something they can do. Anyway, so that's all that I have. Open to questions, and appreciate the patience and flexibility with the technical issues.
Wonderful, Bret. And as Kasia mentioned, we've been in touch with you for some months now, and as you mentioned too, bummer that we've delayed this job fair, but I think it's so important to really amplify a population that's often underserved, as you've pointed out. And I assume we're seeing some shifts for the positive, or have things been slow to move in all of these issues, whether it's homelessness, employment, and also in leadership roles, as we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. How have things shifted? I think the most significant shift recently, at least on the national level, was the Supreme Court did rule that Title VII, that as written, doesn't list sexual orientation or gender identity as a protected class from workplace discrimination. They recently ruled that yes, sexual orientation and gender identity are included in that, which effectively means that workplace discrimination is based on those factors are banned entirely throughout the state. One thing that I'll say locally that's quite challenging, and I think that the job fair and the process that we've gone through would be the impetus to creating this, is that we're still not addressing cultural changes that have to happen in the workplace. For an easy example, and this is certainly not to call anyone out, but I've seen numerous Zoom meetings where not everyone has their pronouns listed, and I think it was really wonderful that Venture Cafe has the option to list your pronouns when you register. But just one, and that's just a very small small thing, but it is an indicator of the thoughtfulness that organizations are putting into making sure that their spaces are inclusive. But I'm sorry. So to go back, in Rhode Island, the benefit of the job fair is we begin to hopefully start cataloging organizations that are keeping up with really inclusive practices. And my ultimate goal would be to have a comprehensive, just a resource list, right, of people who are moving to Rhode Island or thinking about moving to Rhode Island. Let's create a landing page for them to see what organizations have made a real commitment to this community, and what practices have they adopted. Be very transparent about what practices they have adopted to help folks make a more informed decision about where they want to work.